The first sound the town gives you is not welcome. It is a rule conducted through air. A little bell hanging from a loop of cord taps your wrist because the priest told you to ring when you move, and the watch told you to ring louder when you approach, and a notice nailed to the gate told everyone else to hear you before they see you. You raise your clapper and let it speak. The gate sergeant doesn't look at your face. He watches your staff touch the threshold stone because the charter says the stick and the bell must arrive first. Behind him, the portcullis sighs. Above him, a board reads in a hand that prefers commandments to compassion. Announce yourself. Keep to the left. Bread at the porch. No touching. None of this is theology. It is furniture, bad furniture, nailed by fear. Your palm is clean. Your cloak is patched. The air between you and the square turns into a courtroom because your bell is your summons. Subscribe and tap the bell. Ours, not the one on your wrist, so you don't miss the rest of this walk through charters, porches, and rules you can actually touch. In the comments, write the 7-word advice you'd nail at a town gate where bells had to do the work of walls. Alms at board, not throne, no blows. I'll pin the ones that turn dread into something useful and carry them to part 2 when we enter the Lazar house and post counsel where wrists, not throats, will have to obey. The space a bell makes is never merely space. It is a lesson shouted in brass. Children pry their curiosity out of their mother's fingers and lean until the staff claims a polite line on the stones. A boy lifts a pebble because boys mistake gravity for government. His grandmother squeezes his wrist and whispers a rule older than the plague. Bread placed, not flung. A carpenter's apprentice, proud of new courage, bangs his mallet on the gate to show he understands noise. The sergeant does not scold him. He looks at you instead, then at the board nailed beside the cleft where alms pass, and points with 2 fingers as if laws were better when folded. Board here. Hand flat. Leave room. It is progress when brutality pretends to be bureaucracy, but only progress. The stick keeps your distance, your bell keeps their distance. Between you, crusts, coins, custom, and the absence of touch, you step into a corridor of sideways faces. Market stalls don't advertise themselves. They advertise where you are not supposed to stand. The herb wife, used to sick bodies who still get hugged, says your name because she remembers when you delivered a sack for her cousin, and hands you thyme as if it were proof of charity, rather than proof she can tell the difference between skin and person. A baker's boy lays bread on the board and bows because the parish put his name on a list last feast, approved for alms, and he likes the way approval sounds when it echoes. A tanner mutters, not at you, at the law that allows him to be generous without looking you in the face. He keeps his kindness in a ladle. It is the least dangerous place to keep it. He is not cruel. He is careful. Bells made a city clever enough to pretend distance is decency. You walk to the church porch because porches were invented for these negotiations. The notice under horn at mouth height, always at mouth height, says alms placed, touch avoided, bell rung at approach, porridge at third peal, cloak and clapper to be kept, no blows. The sacristan reads it differently. Bowl, plank, bell, patience. The monk at the soup pot is a bureaucracy with a ladle. He watches the order, counts spoons, scolds anyone who pretends tokens expire early. He does not scold you. He has learned to stir and listen at once. Bread before sermons, he says, when a well-meaning woman begins to recite a saint's life at a man whose fingers shake. He caps the lamp because every porch that survived winter learned to love tin over breath. A child rings a toy bell because children love repeating oppression when it sounds like permission. You curl your hand under his and make his clapper behave. Once, you tell him. His mother starts to pull him away. You raise your staff instead and tap the board between you. She leaves the bread on wood. You leave the time there too, because ritual that isn't mutual is theater, not law. Your hand, when you pick up the crust, shows the uncanny normality that frightens the people who needed you to be a fable. Calluses, ink from a barrel you carried last week, a ring you keep because rings are a language you refuse to surrender. Near the market, cross someone with a cudgel who loves rules for their shape and not their purpose, steps close enough to make the staff tremble. This is the other city the bell lives in, the one that polices virtue with a club. He bangs the stick against your staff as if the wood can absolve him. "Clapper," he says. You lifted a finger higher to keep him from deciding he is a teacher. He would rather beat the air than examine his hunger. You keep the staff steady and let your bell argue for you. He steps aside because the rules are on your side today. On another day, they would pretend to be on his. Bells carry laws like men carry their wages, sometimes intact, sometimes exchanged for something cheaper. Fear is never as organized as it sounds on parchment. A woman who saw a cousin swell and go away secretly believes breath is a color. A butcher who overheard a clerk say unclean decides bones know something numbers won't admit. A pilgrim, in town for a relic, thinks God tallies bells the way money changers tally coins. All three throw alms like distance is medicine. One of them throws a handful with enough force to bruise. You place the coins back on the board one by one. The board is the right height for dignity. The sergeant, seeing his own instruction obeyed more sincerely than he expected, reads the rule out loud instead of drawing his cudgel. No throws. He looks at the pilgrim looks at the horn. Horn looks like a conscience you can touch. The Lazar house outside the gate has rules that look like mercy until you read them with the person they govern. The bell and clapper are issued by the porch, kept by you, but belonging to the law. The cloak is blue or russet, not for comfort, but for identification. The hood is cut wide because the priest can face a human being only when the cut gives him as much air as the bell. The staff is a line drawn where a handshake should be. The charter says food from the board, not the hand, and then congratulates itself for civility. The mistress of the house, sleeves rolled, reads it differently. Bread, bowl, bed, wash, keep, don't break the neighbors. You nod to her, because she is the only reason the bell hasn't become a rope. There are two bells where bells are great liars. One is the handbell you raise before you. The other is the tower bell, which keeps announcing charity like a schedule. They collide when the parish decides a pageant will remind the town of its mercy. The procession expects you to walk behind the cross, and before the boys waving palms, you decide to remain near the board where the bread is. A man shouts at you for disrespect. The sacristan shouts back at him for missing his place. Two women stack bowls and continue feeding the queue because they have learned to rank sacraments by friction. Bells ring and betray nothing. Bowls clink and confess everything. You will be told what the bell is for, and you already know this is an incomplete verb. Ring, so the healthy don't stumble without warning. Ring, so the market can move half a step and pretend generosity is a hinge. Ring, so the baker can feel sanctified when his boy keeps count. Ring, because the charter says no ring means a fine. Ring, because the sound proves that someone has learned to mistake sound for safety. You ring anyway because bells, like beams and lids, are short rules that sometimes help. You refuse to ring when a boy with a cudgel learns to love his job too loudly. You hold the staff instead and move to the light where horn made a notice visible. There are places where the bell buys grace. The bridge where an old woman with a staff runs toll in stories, lets you cross for the price of detail. Tell me the door you slept under, she says. Tell me which porch has the gentlest spoon. Tell me which dog learned your name. You confess geography instead of sins. She laughs like a person who persuaded oak to care about weather. Walk left, she says, but walk where people can see you. Bells friendlier in daylight. She hands you ribbon, because ribbon has become this town's answer to the question, who will stand near me without breaking? What looks like beating often begins as ritual, branding the distance, not the skin. A porter bangs the staff into your staff because he must perform law where his wages are walking away. A child taps a toy cudgel because children always rehearse the worst thing they've seen grown-ups do. A traveler, drunk on his unexamined fear, swings a cane. It lands on wood because wood kept your person from being convenient. The stick is not innocent, but the board collected the coin with less harm than a flung prayer. The lid kept the lamp safer than breath. The horn kept the posting precise enough that scorn had to go home unspent. The town beats less than it pretends. The pretense is still violence. Between porches, you inventory the objects that have been made to do penance, while the city tells itself it is kind. Cloak, hood, badge, staff, bell, charter, board, token. Every one of them is a short rule that could have been a conversation. In part 2, we're going to pin better counsel to the very boards that taught people how to be cruel politely. Alms placed, not thrown, cue read, lamp capped, hand washed, no blows. We will name the Lazar house not as an exile, but as a clinic with soup. We will write a page that a surgeon can read without finding a cudgel to make the point. We will post it at mouth height. We will make wrists brush it mid-porch while horn makes a notice legible and your bowl stays within reach of dignity. Write your 7-word gate law in the comments, and then steal somebody else's to nail near your own kitchen. Alms at board, not thrown. No blows. Because this channel builds furniture anyone can copy, not speeches that only a few can afford. The market sighs around you in the way cities do when memory begins to outperform habit. A baker's boy who wanted to feel brave now wants the board to approve him. A mother who yelled last month now taps her own children's wrists gently away from throwing. An alderman who learned to like his hat less holds a beam while the sacristan hammers a slip that reads, "No sermons longer than soup." A clerk who used to deliver notices now reads them aloud and will someday forgive himself for enjoying it. Your bell will not stop being a bell. Bells never retire. But there is a way to make them sound less like verdicts and more like announcements. Stand under horn, ring once, board between hands, staff steady enough that distance feels like a lane instead of a wall, bowl first, words short. In a town like this, watchers with ladles are more useful than watchers with sticks. You will still meet the stick sometimes. Push your bell toward the beam and hold your ground where wood knew how to be better law than breath. You have allies. You finish the day with a ritual you would have envied last winter. The soup line at the porch reads with bell, not for bell. The monk who learned to cap his lamp with tin turns that gesture into the second blessing. The bell above the porch rings once for bowls, not for bodies. The handbell in your hand rings once so the gate sergeant can do his job without pretending to be a judge. Then you place the clapper on the board while you eat. It lies there like a tool that will have less to do tomorrow because better tools are on duty. Beam, board, bowl. This series is only starting. We haven't walked you through the Lazar House kitchen, the charter page, the alms shelf with its wrong height, the barber who disinfects a staff head because he has read a better page than the old one, the bridge where ribbon did more than ring ever will. Subscribe and tap the bell. Ours, not the one that made you visible today. So part 2 lands where your wrists can use it. In the comments, give me the 7-word rule you'd nail at a parish porch we haven't seen yet. Then say, continue if you want to enter the house by the gateward garden, post counsel that dignifies hands, and rehearse a city that keeps bells from replacing conversation. I'll bring horn, chalk, ribbon, vinegar, a ladle, a better notice, and the habit we keep practicing. Turning ritual that hurt into furniture that helps. The gateward garden of the Lazar house opens like a deliberate kindness in a wall that has learned to speak too confidently. Beds of thyme and rue and calendula sit in lines, a monk once laid out with a string. Their order has a different tone than the notices at the gate. You can hear bees when you lift your bell and ring it once. Careful, because counsel is changing here. Once at the threshold, not every breath. A lay sister points to the plank that now lives under horn at mouth height beside the wicket, your second favorite height after laughter, and you read what hands, not throats, must remember. Alms placed, not thrown. Hand washed at basin. Lamp capped with tin. Bell once at entry, then hung. Staff steady, not shunned. No blows. The sister's sleeves are rolled. She nods like a carpenter who loves good grain. This is a room for work, not theatrics. Subscribe and tap our bell so part 3 lands with your wrists ready. In the comments, write the 7 words you would nail above any porch that feeds and forbids cruelty. Alms placed, hand washed, lamp capped, no blows. I'll pin the best and steal them shamelessly for the next post we hammer at mouth height. You cross the threshold the way a new rule is tested, slow enough to confess, sure enough to become furniture. The basin stands a shoulder-wide step inside the wicket, tin cool from the spring pipe that makes winter polite. A boy who once ran with cudgels runs with a ewer and tips water into your palm with the solemnity of a midwife. Hand, the sister says, and you offer what the town has mistaken for evidence. She pours. You wash. She places a folded scrap of wool beside the basin and says, dry. Not because cleanliness is a spectacle, but because moisture and staffs disagree. The new notice taught the gateward garden to move charity from throats to wrists. The largest miracle so far is how quickly wrists learn when someone bothers to post the instruction at the right height. Inside, the house is a kitchen that remembers it is a clinic and a chapel that remembers it is a kitchen. Broth's kindness scolds the room the way vinegar scolds scoops. A brazier is set back from the table because tin does not like breath. A snuffer cap rests on the shelf like a second blessing. The monk whose ladle announced bowls in the square has learned a new cadence. Bowl first, prayer later, said gently enough that the prayer is better for waiting. The bell you carry hangs on a peg by the door because counsel says ring once, and you are grateful because hands can forget while holding sticks. Bells are best as thresholds, not weather. You place the clapper on the board with the same tenderness a mason shows a stone he will lift again after the frost. Your staff gets a lesson too. Its head has been scrubbed and wrapped in linen that smells like wine and salt because the barber surgeon next door has chosen to be useful instead of theatrical. He can't cure theology, he can disinfect wood. You watch him boil strips with the patience of a bookbinder and dip the staff head as if binding an argument to better grammar. Tin, he says, handing you a sleeve made to fit the cap over the staff's end when a cue forgets itself. Not to shame you, to shame wrists that haven't learned yet. You slide the sleeve on and see how architecture prevents temper. The sister nails a slip under horn above the basin, staff head dipped daily. It feels like housework. It is policy. The next room holds beds along a wall the sun visits first. The cutouts on the shutters let light kneel without bumping noses. Linen is boiled because the laundress carries a charter in her spine that hates mystery. She reads the new counsel under horn in a voice that makes boys with cudgels decide to ladle instead. Hand to bowl, bowl to shelf, cloth to tub, lamp to cap. She does not say bell, because bells are for thresholds. In here, the new charter says rings are for fingers and basins claim the rest. She smiles when she sees you read with your hands instead of your throat. She has waited for months for this to be true. A neighbor arrives with bread she used to throw and now places on the board because the posted card let her own wrists find a better grammar. She looks embarrassed, then proud, then busy, which is the correct sequence of civic emotion. She had loved the old distance because distance fooled her into believing kindness and shunning can live in the same shoe. The board taught her not to make excuses. You tap the card with your staff sleeve, tin on horn, so it hums a little. She laughs because posted rules can feel like jokes that tell the truth. We'll keep this, she says, as if furniture were a vow. The priest has come with a psalter and a face that learned to be smaller while soup was being invented. He reads the longer blessing outside, not so that you miss it, but so you will not be in the act of being fed and judged at the same time. In here, he caps lamps with tin and writes a note in the margin of his own rubric, touch of mantle allowed when staff is between. It is not as large a change as your heart wanted when you rang at the gate, but it is better than a cudgel writing the city's conscience in air. He pins a slip under horn with exactly 7 words, bread before prayer, prayer before talk, no blows, and then remembers to smile because the right order made grace sound like good carpentry. Notices you trust are written by people who carry floors on their backs. 2 brothers from the almonry arrive with a plank they've sawn to fit the gate's rough stone. They drill it and hang a lid for the lamp where boys can reach it without breath. They chalk lines for bowls and bread and the basin step. They hang a small bell by the gate, not to scold. Its clapper has gone missing, but to remind any fool who gets excited that bells are tools, not habits. The beadle's daughter hammers the card with 7 short rules until the wood sings. The cudgel boy watches and finds himself holding the ewer again, and you would laugh if the sound didn't feel too close to morning for all the months when people learned better only after they were tired of listening. The Lazar House garden produces 2 miracles a week: herbs that look like plants rather than verdicts, and apprentices who look like wardens rather than guards. A boy spills basil into your palm and says, "For breath," when syrup exists only in town. And this is an apology, written in leaves, for everything a bell made harder. A girl ties a ribbon on your wrist, not to brand you, but to claim you. Ribbon has become this town's favorite letter of introduction. It does what bells tried to do badly. Ribbon's whisper says, "Stand near. The city is learning to listen to softer orders." Outside, the porch committee posts new council under horn on a card that is exactly the right height to bruise a throat that tries to forget. Alms placed, not thrown. Hand washed, lamp capped. 1 ring at threshold. Staff head dipped. Watch with ladles, not sticks. No blows. They teach it with drills, a stack of bowls for practice, a bucket where sticks learn to be poles for ladders instead, a line on the stones where boards must sit for crowded days. The watchmen spend an afternoon learning not to win arguments they do not have to begin. They pass the staff sleeve like a pen and sign with it by capping a window lamp before a wind can be tempted. A crowd appears and finds itself rehearsing survival instead of outrage. There are men who enjoyed the old ritual because it made them feel taller without becoming useful. One appears now with a set jaw and a voice that knows too many syllables for innocence. "Ring," he tells you, and you point at the posted card. "Once," you say, and place your hand on the board. He tries to knock your staff aside with his own, but his stick has learned to be a pole with tin on top, and the cap takes the blow without warming nobody's ends. He flushes, not with anger, with education. He looks at the notice again and recognizes his own wrist in the script where it says, "Watch with ladles, not sticks." The sacristan hands him a bowl. He takes it. This will become a story the old woman at the bridge tells someone who thinks miracles still owe them trumpets. Market rules that used to ignore you are beginning to study you. A fishmonger who learned to enjoy the sightline between bowl and board puts a small table at his stall so you can buy, not beg. The cooper who peened clout nails for tokens last week makes a sleeve for your staff and refuses payment, then posts staff heads dipped at his booth because he prefers a city where tin shames sticks. A wool stapler hangs a card with cloth measured on table, not thrown, and makes that difference feel like ordinary tenderness. A midwife lays out clean cloth and vinegar by her own door with hand washed before blessing under horn. The neighborhood is discovering that a bell can preface, not punish. The old slips must be torn off somewhere. You pick the bridge because bridges like ceremonies that serve thieves and saints alike. The beadle's daughter climbs the parapet with a knife, ropes the old notice that told the town to expect rings more than faces, and replaces it with the card everyone recognizes now. Alms placed, hand washed, lamp capped, 1 ring, no blows. The old woman looks at the water and says the sentence the river will love: "Walk where witnesses live." She rings once for joy, not warning, and rings no second time because the bell is where it belongs, at the edge of a room, not the middle of your day. The sound feels like a key rather than a brand. Inevitably, an argument arrives that refuses furniture. 2 visiting penitents, holding their own bells as if weight equaled virtue, shout that the porch has made holiness lazy. The ladle committee keeps feeding people. The sacristan caps a lamp. The barber dips a staff head without lecturing anyone, which insults the visiting logic more than your smile does. You hold your bell and ring once. "Board," you say, and it is a sentence the town has learned to translate into bread before anyone remembers how to raise a stick in a boy's hand. The penitents fume, the queue breathes. The charter at mouth height gets a thumbprint from every person whose wrists would like to keep being better than their throats. Notices have cousins. Checklists. The Lazar House invents one you could steal for any kitchen that wants to be a clinic. Hand-washed, bowl-placed, linen boiled, staff-dipped, bell-hung, lamp-capped, card-read. The sister nails it beside the basin. She adds a box for names learned because anonymity was useful to fear and useless to compassion. She writes yours correctly, and your bell feels lighter because now it can be a notification, not a disguise. You add one line beneath her neat script, no sermons longer than soup. She does not laugh, she stirs. This is how credos become recipes. You carry the charter to the men who used to choose cudgels because they couldn't imagine another job. The watch captain brings his crew to the gate and reads the card under horn until the rhythm replaces their old reflex. He makes them practice hand to bowl, bowl to shelf, cap to lamp, bell once 30 times because muscle has the slowest memory. Then he hands them ladles and says, "If you need to hit something, hit the beam with the beetle so it hums at your head first." They do, it does. Their forearms like the bruises better. A winter of better drills is never a cure. It is a suspension of the old accident with instructions attached. Someone will still shout a slur, and someone else will still, someday, try to force the bell to be a branding iron. But the spaces where that can happen keep shrinking. Horn over cards at mouth height, basin at the threshold, staff sleeves, tin caps, posts at board height for alms, kitchens that recognize clinic grammar, bridges that read their own rivers. You ring once walking out, then hang your bell back on the peg you lifted it from. It looks relieved. So does the boy with the ewer. Outside, the square has adopted a new way of being crowded. Elbows for baskets, not elbows for morality. You hear, faint under the market noise, the old gallows beating the rhythm of a benchmaker's ads, the rope naps in coils that make carpenters grin and cudgels nervous. You touch your staff sleeve with 3 fingers because that is your hand's new way of saying carry witnesses. A stranger from another town reads the porch card, smiles, and copies the 7 lines onto his cuff, because his city believes bells must define people. He will hammer a cleaner sentence above his parish gate tomorrow. Someone will bruise a wrist on it. That is how rules become furniture. The Lazar House sister catches your hand before you take your leave and places a folded copy of the card in your palm. "Hang this where you sleep," she says. Not to police you, to police mourning. You slide it into your cloak beside your ring. It will bruise your own wrist when you reach for bread without washing first. It will make you cap your lamp when the ewer is asleep. It will force your hand to remember everything your mouth promised to admire. We have not finished, we have begun in the only useful way. 7 short lines, hung where laziness must bruise itself, rehearsed until wrists can obey without looking up anxiety. If you want to keep building this kit into the barber's shop, the bridge toll, the pilgrim hospice, the charter page, and the market choir, subscribe and tap the bell so part 3 lands with your hands ready. In the comments, write the 7 words you would place in any room that feeds fear less than it feeds people. And say, continue if you want to walk the rest of this town, posting better counsel where bells used to shout alone, until blows retire and boards do their jobs. I'll bring horn, chalk, ribbon, tin, vinegar, beetle, ladle, and a card that knows how to fit under any mouth that has decided to behave. The barber's door keeps a basin on a peg outside now, and that is the first evidence that a posted card can outshout a habit. You knock with the staff sleeve once, and he calls you in the way craftsmen call in anyone who looks like work. His shop is warm, because razors and winter share a religion. On the beam above the wash shelf hangs the card you wrote yesterday in his half-legible hand, hand-washed, cloth boiled, staff head dipped, lamp capped, bell hung, bowl first, no blows. He grins at your look and shows off like a boy with a new plane. Linen boiled in a pot that steams the window, vinegar waiting in a jar, tin cap warm beside the lamp, a rolled sleeve made to slide onto any cudgel that thinks it must babysit compassion. Staff heads dipped each morning, he says, and demonstrates with a ladle he stole from a stew line and intends to return with apologies and jokes. The bell hangs silent on a peg, and he points at it the way a smith points at an old spur. Tool, he says, not sermon. You like him because he has found the correct insult for the old ritual, obsolete rather than holy. Subscribe and tap our bell so the next rehearsal lands in your feed when your wrists can use it. And in the comments, write the 7 words you would nail above any barber's basin that hopes to be a clinic. Hand-washed, cloth-boiled, staff-dipped, lamp-capped. I'll pin the best and carry them to the hospice on the road where porches become hospitals and kitchens stop pretending soup and law cannot share a shelf. You need a charter that the gate will obey, so you walk to the scriptorium with vinegar and a pencil stub to teach ink the economy you want. The town clerk meets you at a high desk that has seen more marriages than reconciliations. He expects phrases that smell of banners. You hand him a plank and point at horn. Alms placed, not thrown. Hand washed, lamp capped, 1 ring at threshold, staff head dipped. Watch with ladles, not sticks. No blows. He laughs, sighs fast, and writes it exactly as you said it, then adds a line in his own neat hand because clerks can't help it. Posted at mouth height. You let him keep the flourish because beams admire ownership, not plagiarism. He tacks the fair copy under horn at the gate and at the market cross, and you feel the day get heavier in a friendly way. Obligation, like a wet cloak that keeps you alive. The bridge calls you to teach the toll how to be a sentence rather than a shrug. The old woman has decorated her staff with ribbon now, not for prettiness, but for memory. Every story that bought a crossing tied to a knot. You hang a second card beside hers, the words you stole from her years of doing your job better. Walk left, board between hands, watch with ladles, stories for toll, no blows. A pilgrim with a bell longer than his humility tries to ring, while telling her to admire his penance. She taps his knuckles gently with the staff sleeve and points to the card. He reads, blushes, and puts his clapper on her board while he takes soup like a man. She pockets the story he gives her, the day he learned to eat before begging to be seen, and considers it worth more than silver. On the road beyond the bridge, you meet the hospice that knows bells are for thresholds and soup is for sentences. The porch card lives at mouth height in a language that kitchen boys can understand. Alms placed, hand washed, lamp capped, bell hung, staff dipped, bowl first, no blows. A sister whose hands earned forgiveness without words stands by the basin and makes a little ritual of hospitality that never needs a drum. Pour, rub, dry, sleeve, cap, eat. She has a way of moving that makes you believe she could train a mayor. She hangs your bell on a peg and hands you ribbon instead, because ribbon means stand with me, not stand away. When a traveler arrives with a stick and a sermon, she gives him a bowl and points his staff to the basin. He thinks she didn't hear him. She heard him. She just prefers verbs. The guild that fashions cudgels into poles thinks it wants to be insulted and learns instead to be employed. You bring sleeves of tin and slips of counsel into their hall and ask them to drill the watch in the new liturgy. Hand to bowl, bowl to shelf, cap to lamp, bell once. They grumble and then laugh at their own wrists when they realize how good it feels to make noise at the right height. A boy who used to love gaining courage by banging on other people's staffs discovers he likes capping lamps better. Lightning that would have picked his bones off a courtyard roof hisses into tin instead. You see a dozen small futures where a bruise on a wrist saved a city by teaching it to be careful about where to hurt. Market choruses have changed their rhymes. The fiddler does not ask to lead. The women who read the cue tell him which verses to play and which ones to retire. He learns to love 7-word lines because 7-word lines make people behave. Alms placed, hand washed, lamp capped, no blows. He makes it around so boys can practice with a beat because rhythm is the oldest tool for telling bodies what to do in crowds. The baker's girl sings while rinsing the scoop without looking, and a visiting merchant who wanted a spectacle gets a receipt instead. He will tell his own market that the song worked better than guards ever did, and he will be right. You go back to the gate at noon because the only way to trust a card is to see what it does when the square thinks it is busy. Three little scenes act themselves around it like a morality play that finally hired a competent prop master. A mother who used to throw cannot throw anymore because her hand bruised itself on words. She lays a loaf on the board and remembers to wait long enough to watch you pick it up. A watchman who used to use his stick as punctuation reaches for the staff sleeve instead, laughs at himself, and taps the lamp cap for practice. His friends laugh with him. The city becomes a party that only relief attends. A clerk recites the card to a pilgrim, then reads it to himself, then reads it without words. That third skill is the only one he will still need in spring. Not every correction is gentle. A trader visiting from a town that still believes bells are law without humans tries to teach your porch how to be worse. He tells a boy to ring while eating because that is better than a beating. The boy gives him a look a city taught him and points at the card. The trader scoffs that notices cannot change nature. The barber steps out with his tin sleeve and quietly caps the lamp in the trader's face, just hard enough to make the flame behave and the man think. Nature is not what you think, the cap says. The boy finishes eating without ringing. The trader finishes thinking without beating. You sigh into your staff because fatigue and gratitude are cousins that never visit together. The clerk insists your counsel should live on the charter page as well as on beams. You let him. He writes it exactly as you pinned it, and you hold his ladder while he hammers at mouth height. When he climbs down, he looks so pleased with himself that you nearly forgive him for being able to afford a ladder. You remind him how the page differs from the beam. The page induces memory. The beam imposes bruise. He nods, suddenly tired and earnestly older. You think the city will keep him. This thought feels better than mercy. New trouble tries to wear old trousers. A band of boys thinks a bell deserves a parade and displays their obedience by wringing one another's wrists raw. You stop them by offering them a drill they can love the way they wanted to love noise. Chairs, lined like a queue so they can practice board between hands, hand to bowl, cap to lamp, staff dipped. Their bodies learn the beat faster than their moral arguments would have. You leave them laughing about how much better they are at caps than their fathers. This is the only kind of rivalry that doesn't cause fights in spring. A woman who never had to like you learns to love the card. She had thrown bread before dawn for 2 winters. She had told herself, because the town told her, that gestures are safer than glances. Now she sets a loaf on the board, waits to see which fingers take it, and realizes shame has been doing the work fear claimed as its job. She admits this out loud to nobody important and everyone essential, herself. She drinks broth at the porch after she announces her name to herself. That day counts for more than a sermon. The bell you bring to every threshold gets 3 quiet victories. First, it becomes etiquette. 1 ring tells a room another body has arrived. Everyone moves an inch, nobody becomes a statue. Second, it becomes courtesy. You hang it where you can reach it and then forget it while your wrists obey counsel. Third, it becomes memory. You hear other bells downtown, and you know the cities that have cards and the cities that have sticks. You promise to send a copy to everyone who writes their porch address under our video. Mid-porch, drop your 7 words for the hospice doorway where a bell should yield to a basin. 1 ring, hand-washed, lamp-capped, no blows. Be as bossy as you need to be. The useful ones will outlive this upload by rubbing themselves into wood. The city's singers try a new worship. At Vespers, the priest, with sore wrists from the basin, recites what is already posted under horn and confesses he likes being smaller. In the alehouse, the fiddler blows a kiss toward the porch because he enjoys being obeyed by nouns more than by adjectives. In the guild hall, the warden asks the beadle's daughter to read the card into the minutes. She does. The minutes improve. In the barber's bed, a boy falls asleep with ribbon around his wrist because he likes belonging to something that did not need his throat. On the bridge, the old woman sends 2 ribbons downstream as letters to another town. On the abbey's guest board, a novice writes the card in 3 languages because hospitality finally remembers itself. You return to the Lazar garden at dusk with your bell on its peg and your staff sleeve drying. The lay sister sweeps the threshold because order survives longer than inspiration. Children practice the drill under the card with laughter that never touches meanness. A boy tries the staff sleeve on his own stick and announces he will never let someone's fear keep his hand from being useful again. A girl caps the lamp twice because the wind tried to audition. You set the beetle on the plank with just enough force to make the wood hum and the card tremble. The hum travels through thresholds like a small hymn. Bells nap, boards remember, hands obey. This is enough progress for one walk. If you want to carry the kit to the Bridge Toll Master's Ledger and the Pilgrim Hospice by the Crossroads, where bells first became a job and soup first became a rule, subscribe and tap the bell so the next rehearsal lands where your wrists can use it. In the comments, tell me what 7 words you would nail in your own kitchen, above your own basin, between your own lamp and board, where laziness must bruise itself daily. Then say continue if you want to see who taught a cudgel to serve and who taught a gate to be a table. I'll bring horn, chalk, ribbon, vinegar, tin, beetle, ladle, and a card that packs smaller than fear and works harder than shame. The toll master's ledger sits under the arch like a wary animal that has decided to allow daylight, so you set horn against the stone until the warm coin of light invites numbers to stop pretending to be fog. The old woman with the staff stands beside you, her ribbon knots telling the history of crossings better than any parchment. The toll master clears his throat the way men do when they wish law would arrive wearing their hat. You hang counsel at mouth height. Where wrists must brush it to leave, walk left, board between hands, toll posted, sacks opened, wives watching, stories for toll, no blows. He tries to point at the old list, higher, older, sanctified by grime. You tap the new card with the tin sleeve on your staff and let wood hum until his eye admits what his pride refuses. The useful law is the one you can bump, subscribe, and tap our bell. Ours is the one that makes videos arrive, not cudgels. And in the comments, write the exact 7 words you would nail under any bridge where fear likes to announce itself. Walk left, board between hands, no blows. I'll pin the best and carry them to the hospice on the road, where posted words and soup beat bells and sticks. The toll master opens his ledger and you see how fog taught ink to be brave. Exemptions has swollen like a river. Aid has learned to be a barrel. Charity has acquired a price. You slide the plank closer and put vinegar on the pen nib. The nib forgets to lie. Rates, you tell him, and he reads them under horn, then under rain, then under the old woman's eyebrows, which remain the town's truest audit. Witness, she says, and 2 wives chalk a fish and a number on the pier post. A pilgrim with a bell longer than his humility tries to ring during the reading. The toll master's hand twitches toward his stick. You raise the sleeve, show the word no, and point to stories for toll. The pilgrim learns to pay in details. The saint he aims for, the ditch he slept behind, the baker's child who set bread on the board instead of throwing, and the post inherits the tale in chalk. Sticks have nothing to do. Downriver at the ferry, the boatman keeps 2 ropes, one for the boat, one for people who think arrival is the same as permission. You hand him ribbon so the second rope can retire and become lashings for ladders. He grins because his wrists prefer knots that hold rather than knots that scold. He nails your card to the ferry mast, where sets of hands will bruise it. Board between hands, hand washed on landing, lamp capped in wind, 1 ring, no blows. The river tests it immediately with a gust that tries to brag. Tin kisses flame, ribbon flicks, the ferry hums the same tune as the gate. This is how laws become geography. The Pilgrim Hospice at the Crossroads receives your kit like a kitchen inherits a cookbook. Porch first, always. Basin, cap, board, sleeve, card, alms placed, hand washed, lamp capped, bell hung, staff dipped, bowl first, no blows. Then the long room where straw is folded into rope for mats, where broth is stirred by men who remember sticks too well and ladles better, where the beam's height is the only sermon anyone hears to the end. A sister who keeps accounts with pebbles reads the card in 3 tongues, yours, the merchant's, and the monk's, because a road that welcomes cannot afford a single language. She asks you to add one line for people with bells from cities that learn to be cruel politely. One ring at threshold. You nail it. Her face softens the way porch wood does after it is sanded. Some sentences look like forgiveness and last longer. At the rear of the hospice, a low gate trains crowds the way lintels train sentences. You paint a line where boards must sit and drill the drill, hand to bowl, bowl to shelf, sleeve to staff, cap to lamp, until boys who once thought discipline belonged to sticks become proud of their wrists. A man from a neighboring town tries to pay for soup with a story that insults the card, loud, long, and requiring everyone else to perform pity. The sister taps the beam with her ladle. He folds himself down to 7 words and learns wonder. Slept dry, soup hot, thanks, walking on. He smiles afterward, surprised at how clean gratitude requires less breath. The watch captain who once nursed her stick like a profession brings 6 men to learn the new cadence from someone who will not make it smaller for them. She lines them at the hospice porch and makes them practice until their forearms admit rhythm. Caps down, hands open, boards steady, voices brief, bowls forward, sticks idle. They stare at you, then at the card, then at their own sleeves. You'll bruise less like this, she says, and they realize this is a mercy they can feel tomorrow. One asks if bells will retire entirely. No, you say. They will behave like door knockers instead of sentences. He laughs with his shoulders. That is the laughter you wanted to buy. Back at the bridge, you find the tollmaster, reading not just rates but receipts. How many bowls the crossing financed this week? How many staff caps? How many sleeves dipped? How many cards copied for other towns? The old woman leans on her staff and lets him be proud in public. She knows pride that earns its bowls is a civic vitamin. A wagoner tries to slip through with a whip unanswered by ribbon. She raises a single eyebrow, and the whip forgets its punctuation. He lays it on the board with both hands and says, "Teach me knots." You place ribbon in his palm and name the knot aloud, so his mouth will keep his wrist honest. Market tries its favorite drama, satire that scolds instead of instructs. A song about bells and shame rises next to a stall where you taught a child to cap a lamp yesterday. The fiddler winks because he knows you hate speeches. You clap him on the shoulder, point at the beam, and hand him the sheet with 7 words. Alms placed, hand washed, lamp capped, bell hung, no blows. He plays them. The crowd sings them. The satire slinks home to become a better chorus later. Drama isn't evil, it is irresponsible when it arrives unposted. Not every guard relinquishes old habits without performing his exit. You find one at the gate, banging the sleeve against his own staff to feel important. Sleeves save wrists, you tell him, not reputations. He flushes and surprises you by asking, "What do I do with my hands then?" "Hold bowls," says the sister from the hospice, who has followed you to distribute weight, not wisdom, and gives him 2. He grins, because bowls are heavier in the right places than sticks are in the wrong ones. He learns to enjoy the ache that bought the end of a rumor. A clerk at the charter page adds your 7 lines to the margins with the guilty delight of a man who thought parchment had to be ceremonial to be valid. He asks whether the sheriff must sign. "No," you tell him. The beams signed when wrists started bruising there instead of on bodies. He mutters something that might be a prayer for copyists and hammers a card above his own desk at mouth height, where his lips will have to brush it when he excuses himself. He blushes. You like this city's capacity to embarrass its scribes into usefulness. Because the card must travel, you take a bundle of them and a handful of nails to the crossroads where caravans invent new mistakes every hour. You nail the sentences where drivers read while thinking about wheels. Walk left, boards between hands, lamp capped, 1 ring, no blows. A drover who thinks bells are for theater tries to make you an exemption. You refuse. The road becomes a little louder with the right sounds, caps, bowls, boards, pebbles, and a little quieter with the wrong ones. You watch this happen and think of every square that wished to be gentle and discovered it had the tools after all. Horn, ribbon, tin, vinegar, chalk, ladle, nails, beam. Midbridge, tell me what 7 words you would carve into your own staff sleeve, just inside the tin, where only your wrist will see them. Cap first, 1 ring, No blows, bowl first. The best will become hidden rules that carry themselves without needing to be posted. Late afternoon brings the hardest test. A visitor from a town that collects alms by spectacle, ringing his bell in your hospice room after washing so he can be seen being unclean. The sister points to bell hung with a look that could instruct wood. He refuses and bangs it again. You take the clapper out. He gapes as if you stole his mouth. Threshold, you say, and hang the bell on the peg by the door where it belongs with coats and weather. He gives you a look of such complicated relief, you almost forgive the chain of instinct that brought him here. He eats, finally, and asks for a copy of the card. You give him 2. Supper is a lesson written in bowls. The watch captain hands them out because that is how she keeps her men from dreaming about sticks. The barber brings sleeves to trade for ribbon. The cooper brings caps to trade for stories. The toll master reads how many crossings bought bread and how many bought instructions. The clerk reads bowls into rain. The fiddler plays 7 words. The beadle's daughter pounds a nail through an extra card above the alley basin, with the quiet grace of someone who wants morning to remember. You hang your bell back on its peg and feel your shoulders applaud. You go once more to the gate and stand where the cudgel boy used to grow brave. He carries the ewer now. He has rewritten his job description with tin and ribbon. You ask him what should be added to the card. He studies the beam. Names learned, he says, and grins, embarrassed by his tenderness. You write it, small, and he covers his face with his sleeve because he knows he has just been promoted to adulthood by a sentence. There is still someone who wants to turn rule into punishment. He arrives with a cudgel that looks polished, a face that looks bored, a tone that looks sworn. He announces that the card is new and therefore unholy. You announce that the beam is old and therefore holy enough. He flicks his stick against your staff sleeve. Tin answers with a noise that says grow. The beadle's daughter bangs the card with her fist. The watch captain hands him a bowl. The old woman tells him a story he can't afford to misunderstand. The sister nods toward the basin. The barber lifts the ladle. He puts his stick down and eats. This is not triumph. This is civilization. By the time the lamps are being capped for evening, the bell at your wrist has become as light as a key. You hang it where it belongs, on the peg where thresholds keep their one necessary noise, and take your staff with the tin sleeve that taught the town how to hit the right things. You tap the beam once. Wood answers. The city has acquired the sound a good table makes when you set a bowl upon it, expectant, content, ready to brace the next lesson without applause. If you want to carry this kit into the records office, where names can be salvaged from fable, and into the town choir, where 7 words will be sung until wrists memorize them, subscribe and tap the bell so Part 5 lands in your queue. In the comments, write the 7 words you would post where bells first used to replace conversation and end with continue, so I know to bring horn, chalk, ribbon, vitin, vinegar, beetle, ladle, and cards that fit under any mouth that is finally ready to behave. The records office is a long, low room that used to believe dust was an argument, so you lean horn against the mullion until a warm coin of light lands on parchment and dares ink to behave. Shelves of bound rolls, boxes of wills, a chest that swallowed baptisms and forgot burials. You set your palm on the clerk's desk as if oak could borrow your pulse, then hang counsel at mouth height where wrists must brush it to leave. Names learned, alms docketed, token restored when bowl given, bell once at threshold, hand washed, lamp cap no blows. The clerk reads it, surprised at 7 lines that do not need his adjectives. He opens the register of unknowns, and horn makes the margin look like a wound. Girl from the north gate, ragged blue cloak, a hand wrote last winter. Man with staff, bell lost, another wrote when snow preferred silence. You slide the roll beside the stew ledger and the hospice list, fingers counting witnesses. The clerk's pen begins to cross-reference lives instead of sorting them. He writes restored beside 3 names and witness beside 4. He writes with bowl where yesterday he wrote without name. It isn't absolution. It is accounting done at the right height, under a light that refuses theater. Two women from the porch committee arrive with a slate they call the common memory. They chalk short lines that could be sung as easily as filed. Rafe, baker's boy, bread at board, not thrown. Mari from the bridge, story bought toll, fish chalked, old Martin, staff dipped, lamp capped, thanks. The clerk writes the same in the register without sighing because Horn changed his throat's job. You add a slip under Horn, above his stool, no sermons longer than soup. He laughs, then obeys, and discovers he writes better when he has less air and more furniture. A long table at the back wall becomes a garden for tangles. Cord-bound bundles of tokens, ribbon-tied slips from porches, fish-stamped dockets from the stew rail. The barber arrives with sleeves to hold staff heads and asks to dip a boy's stick in vinegar because he learned to tell the difference between zeal and disease. The sister from the hospice hangs a small basin at the end of the table. The clerk washes before he touches ribbon. You did not imagine you would love this room. It smells like glue and rescue. Outside the wicket, a small desk becomes the naming place for those with bells. The posted card lives at mouth height, one ring at threshold. Hand-washed, staff-dipped, bell hung, name spoken, token issued. The boy with the ewer pours, the clerk listens. The porch committee watches with ladles instead of sticks. When a woman who slept 3 nights in the tannery vat says she is nobody, the card interrupts her gently. She finds a word and the register breathes. When a pilgrim arrives ashamed of his city's ritual, he rings once, hangs the bell, speaks his saint, writes his name and eats. Bells become door knockers. Records become bowls. Subscribe and tap our bell. Ours is the one that brings the next tool to your wrists. And in the comments, write the 7 words you would nail above any ledger that wants to be kind. Names learned, token restored, bowl given, no blows. I'll pin the ones that carry well and nail them where charter pages meet kitchens, so clerks and sisters can share a language that survives weather. Paper learns rhythm faster when someone makes it sing. In the scriptorium, you watch the clerk draft a half sheet every watchman can carry without becoming a preacher. Ring once, wash, cap, hang bell, board between hands, speak name, no blows. The watch captain rolls one into her cuff. She teaches her crew to point at the words before they point at anyone. You add a lenticular sentence posted at mouth height to the charter copy he files. The city likes its own reflection when it wears 7-word lines. The alms docket used to be a private concession inside Velvet's chest. Now it lives beside the soup ledger like a pair of lungs. A token stamped with a fish travels from porch to stew, from stew to records, from records back to the hand that rang once. The cycle teaches dignity how to balance. The register learns to copy bowls with more appetite than adjectives. You slap a fish on a boy's docket when he asks whether thanks counts. He grins like a roof in rain. Choir practice borrows the porch. The Beatles' daughter stands where the card hangs and gives 7 words their pitch. Alms placed, hand washed, lamp capped, bell hung, no blows. The choristers cap the lamps before the first note. A ladle taps the lid instead of a drum. A boy tries to lengthen a line and finds the town humming the short version until his mouth admits that brevity kept winters asleep. It is not piety. It is muscle memory set to usefulness. Street singers adapt by survival. The old jest about bells becomes a 2-part canon that starts in the market and resolves under the bridge. One part sings board between hands while the other answers walk left. Then both sing no blows until boys practicing courage find better chores. The fiddler laughs at himself when he forgets a line, and a fishmonger shouts the missing word from his stall. Rhyme has become a coach, not an accomplice. The chronicler in the guild hall writes a different kind of entry. He copies 7-word lines into the town book between taxes and market days, then adds a marginal hand pointing to posted at mouth height. Where beam is, law survives, he tells a novice who asks whether rhyme counts. The novice caps a lamp with tin and agrees from the wrist. You like that conversation better than any balcony speech you've endured all season? At the bridge, the old woman turns stories into meter. She knocks the staff sleeve against the card when a pilgrim's tale threatens to lengthen into a cudgel. She taps a pulse that keeps gratitude honest. A barge lad learns to say thanks, hot, left, crossing, witness, walking on. He keeps his breath for ropes. The toll master watches and decides to write tales in chalk under fish marks, not because parchment demanded it, but because a child asked. Good practice is always 11 questions deep. A troupe arrives with satire it sells as reform. They have bells on their ankles and cudgel jokes in their mouths. You bring them to the porch and point at horn. The beadle's daughter offers them the right chorus. They try it, find the crowd singing back, and discover applause is warmer when it helps. They go to the hospice and play a pantomime of board between hands that makes children tyrants of good manners. You admire them for knowing how to be embarrassed. The alley that used to dress in broken pots for charivaris of shame learns a new thing: cap and bowl nights. Neighbors march a man who forgot himself to the porch, cap the lamp, wash, post no blows, and ladle him into clarity. He apologizes in 7 words. He holds boards for a week. He ties ribbons for strangers. It is quieter than the old noise and cruel only to pride that makes cities brittle. A zealot arrives with a clapper and a prophecy that requires pain. He bangs at the hospice and shouts at the card. The sister points to the basin. He refuses. The barber dips the staff head without looking up. You hang the clapper on its peg and ring once for threshold instead. He tries to lift his stick. The sleeve shines. The watch captain hands him a bowl. The old woman tells him a story about distance that became a table. He sits. Eating is a more persuasive revelation than shouting, provided someone posted a rule that lets wrists cooperate. The alms shelf at a grocer's stall becomes a civic lesson. He nails board here under horn so tokens can land civilly. He posts hand-washed above his own basin so he remembers to be proud from the wrist, not the throat. 2 shops copy him before noon. By evening, a fish is drawn in chalk on a dozen boards around the square. You write "steal this" under 1 card because you want to be robbed of rules. Children turn the porch drill into a street sport. They run hand to bowl and cap to lamp races. They shout bell once at each threshold. They make 4 boys hold a board and practice not spilling dignity. A girl taps the staff sleeve against tin and sentences a boy to ladle duty for making a noise without a reason. He accepts. He becomes excellent. You will hire him in spring to read the stew ledger. Artisans set up a kit bench in the market, where sleeves, caps, cards, and pegs can be bought cheaper than sorrow. A messenger foreign to town asks if these are trinkets. The old woman answers, "They are how we fold appetite into rules." She sells him a bundle and makes him promise to send a drawing of the beam he bruises back to her in a fortnight. He cries because he thought his town needed miracles. The sheriff and alderman conspire with the charter clerk to slip 7 lines into law where they cannot be argued into adjectives. Card posted on every porch under horn, basin, sleeve for staff, cap for lamp, peg for bell, board for alms, no blows. They do not hold a parade. They tie ribbons around the nails and go back to work. You see carpenters measuring the gallows and smile because benches take longer to make on purpose. Winter thins without consulting you, which is nature's way of reminding cities that they are not the main character. You keep the drill anyway. Bowl counts read in rain, names learned in sun, staff heads dipped daily, lamps capped laughingly even when warm air convinces everyone they are immortal. Audit day, 7 words sung, fish counted, pebbles weighed, register lines reconciled with bowls. The rope never stops existing, it just keeps sleeping. Subscribe and tap the bell. Part 6 is Records and Choir in Concert, a city singing its ledger until wrists have nothing left to learn. And in the comments, write the 7 words you'd pin over any choir stall that hopes to instruct better than impress. Alms placed, hand washed, lamp capped, no blows. I'll pin the ones that travel and hammer them where notes can teach bodies. A farmer from 3 parishes overcopies your card by memory on a scrap and asks for ribbon because his bridge is mean. You take the basket, horn, cards, beetle, chalk, vinegar, ribbon, sleeves, caps, and tie wisdom around his wrist. Then you watch him whisper your rules to his mule as if the beast were an alderman. The mule flicks an ear. It is more than most humans manage the first week. You close the day where you always wanted to. At the hospice porch, bell hung, staff sleeve drying, lamp capped with one soft click. The beadle's daughter hammers a fresh card where rain ate the last ink. The watch captain ladles. The old woman counts stories. The barber dips a staff head and whistles. The clerk writes a name without capital letters because humility learned grammar. You tap the beam with the beetle so wood hums and children hush. Bells nap. Boards wait. Hands remember. If you want the choir to carry this card until drums forget their line, say continue below. I'll bring horn, chalk, ribbon, tin, vinegar, beetle, ladle, and pages that turn sentences into songs you can feel in your wrists. The choir starts where the porch left off, under the same horn and card, but with throats that have learned to serve wrists. The cantor loved his florid alleluias last winter. Today he sets his music on the beam, so his mouth must touch the rule before it reaches pitch. He taps the tin cap with 2 fingers and says, "We'll begin with the short lines," and the beadle's daughter, who took the measure from ladles and lids, stands him where children can hear him obey. Alms placed, hand washed, lamp capped, bell hung, no blows. He sings them as if reading a ledger into weather. The choir answers, and the porch smells like soup, meeting justice. Subscribe and tap our bell so the next rooms land where your hands can use them. And in the comments, write the 7 words you'd print at the top of any choir page that hopes to improve bodies, not just voices. Alms placed, hand washed, lamp capped, no blows. I'll pin the ones that travel and hammer them to stalls where notes practice being rules. Inside the nave, the organ tells the same truth the beam does. Pipes respond to breath the way wood responds to wrists, and the choirmaster learns to post counsel for singers, not just parishioners. Breathe after bowls, cap lamps before hymn, 1 ring at processional, no sermons longer than song. He laughs at his own card because it sounds like a first sermon written by a carpenter, and then he loves it because the choir intones those sentences into stone until even the tower bell starts mimicking their scale. You stand where fright used to stand and feel your shoulders walk slower because the space has sworn to once and then listen. The records office and the choir trade jobs for an afternoon. The clerk brings the register of restored names to the cantor's desk and asks the choir to speak them into town, not as spectacle, but as schedule. The beadle's daughter chooses the meter, the barber caps the lamps, the watch captain ladles for anyone who came to hear themselves matter. Mary, Rafe, Old Martin. The names go up with the same dignity as rates, and the nave, which had become too fond of banners, discovers it likes the flavor of bowls pronounced into echo. A boy hears his mother's name, stares at the card, and stops ringing the toy clapper he thought he needed to carry. He puts it on the peg by the door and asks for ribbon. His hand already knows the knot. The procession trains itself under horn. The old carnival order, bell first, cudgels marching like punctuation, pity parading in long sentences, becomes a rehearsal that would pass any carpenter's inspection. Board between hands to begin, held by 4 who used to hold sticks. Hand washed at the porch basin before lifting anything holy. Lamp capped at the nave door so glow behaves like grammar. Bell hung next to coats and weather, no blows writ where knees must bend. The watch captain times it with a lid because lids consistently improve religion. The sacristan discovers his favorite moment of the day is the beam's small hum when the beadle strikes it to call attention. When someone tries to ring twice, the choir unsings them with politeness. No cudgel could manage. At the hospice road, the choir takes its music to the ditch and proves the card was practical poetry. The sisters lay bowls as measures. The boys who learned board between hands make the benches a parade of good habits. The toll master reads crossings into key. The old woman counts stories like verses. The clerk notes names without adjectives, and then hands the pencil to a child to write witness for the person who fed him last year. A singer who used to believe his music had nothing to do with soup feels ladle weight in his palm and discovers rhythm was always a civic muscle. The parish across the river wrote to say they were trying your kit. They had a bell with better ambitions than their porch. You load the basket and cross at the bridge where Ribbon keeps its education tied to posts. Under their nave horn, the first thing you hang is not piety, but the same short counsel, alms placed, hand-washed, lamp-capped, bell-hung, no blows. Their clerk brings a book of unknowns whose margins look like winter, and your choir reads 3 names into a room that had been saving its throat. Children nail one card at mouth height by the basin and another under the lamp on the north pier. A watchman who thought he had trained his hands only for sticks cries into his sleeve at the phrase, "Watch with ladles," and asks to carry bowls. They clap once at each posted rule, as if nails were miracle. You don't correct them. Back home, the market builds a singing corner the way it built a counting corner. A board hangs at the fiddler's stall and says, "Chorus here, 7 lines." He keeps a stack of slips so tradesmen can add their piece. Bread at board from the baker, cloth measured on table from the stapler, staff head dipped from the barber, lamp capped from every shop that owns a flame. Children run between stalls, shouting the next right phrase, and for once stall keepers ask to be corrected. You haven't seen this many adults choose short words since the stew mistress discovered how to read bowls under a squall. In the school, pebbles under arches become notes under fingers. The beadle's daughter draws 5 lines on a slate and writes the rules on the staff so wrists can read them as music. The boys who used to ring for license learn to clap board between hands on the 2 and 4. The girls who love rhythm teach lamp-capped claps to their grandfathers. The organist tries to decorate. The children undecorate him fondly. He smiles and accepts the affection because his hat has learned to duck. The records clerk, flushed with unexpected usefulness, starts a ledger of thanks in the margin of the town book. It is a quiet chorus the city can sing to itself when weather admits you are not the main character. Thanks, Mari, bread placed, Rafe, scoop rinsed, Old Martin, staff dipped, toll master, rates posted, sheriff, a size read in rain, choir, names learned. The chronicler who used to write rumors of saints begins a new habit. Names of people who made sticks learn other jobs. He argues with his conscience about whether he should leave space under each line for someone to scrawl witness. He does, and pretends it was his idea. A neighbor returns from another town with a copy of your card written in his own hand at mouth height, only slightly too high. You help him move it down. He laughs at his pride and keeps the hole in the plaster as a memory. In his parish, they sing your 7 words as processionals. They had to invent a tuneful way to say no blows. Their choirmaster loved the problem more than his own ego. This is how bad decades get reworded. Zeal never stops trying for tenure. A cantor who wants to practice his old size tries to graft a long alleluia onto the short chorus. The beadle's daughter hands him a bowl because she is clandestinely the most revolutionary genius in town. He eats, his breath evens. His alleluia returns shorter. He keeps the cap on the lamp while his resentment cools. You do not congratulate yourself for this victory. It belongs to a beam and 7 words and a girl who refused to quit reading them aloud. The beadle learns a second meter for the beadle, names learned, and uses it in the records office when the clerk reaches for adjectives. The barber lends him a cap so lamplight behaves well on ink. The 2 of them teach the scribe to say restored before he says unknown, a reformation that would have required a synod if you had waited for permission. Everyone preferred nails to bishops this season. Processions enter kitchens. Weddings practice hand to bowl before anyone says vows. Mothers insist on lamp capped over cradles. Midwives nail hand washed above jars and paste cards to the inside of baskets that go through markets where bells used to be the only grammar people could bear to learn. Your city begins to feel like it will survive without your ladder. You feel the odd vertigo of civic success, idleness, and learn to enjoy being the person who holds beams while children teach their elders what to say. A delegation arrives from a choir that sees your card as competition and thinks it must defend its own syllables. You show them the records room, not the nave. They read restored names into the ledger and realize the only anthem that mattered this winter was pronounced in soup. They hum it on the way out without telling you. You will hear it in their square next month and pretend you don't know where they stole it. The bell in your hand has learned to be light. The clapper lies on the peg so thoroughly it might as well be a spoon that picks up only thresholds. You ring once entering rooms that don't have beams yet. You hang it when you find horn and card and basin. You find you can't be tempted to clang while eating, or to warn while reading, or to pretend virtue when ribbon already recruited better allies. You begin to suspect bells could become instruments, chimed at the end of stew readings as punctuation rather than fear. The fiddler says he knows how to write that into a refrain. Mid-knave, write your 7-word choir rule for the last practice before spring, something singable that still bruises laziness. Alms placed, hand washed, lamp capped, bell hung, no blows. The posts you write today become beams in other towns. Do that work in the comments. Then take someone else's line for your own door. At sunset, the town chooses its civics exam. Not a parade, not a scaffold, not even a storm. The records clerk, the choir, the porch committee, the watch captain, the barber with sleeves, the old woman at the bridge, the toll master, the miller's boy with ribbon in his pocket. They gather under horn at the market beam and chant 7 lines once, then hammer them into spring by reading bowls in the meter you gave them. Alms placed, hand washed, lamp capped, bell hung, board between hands, names learned, no blows. The beetle hums, the rope naps, and benches listen like lumber that survived a bad job assignment. The square exhales, even fog seems polite. You set the basket down and let your wrists forget their cleverness. The city will carry itself for the next part if you keep it supplied with cards, pegs, sleeves, and people who like brief victories. It's enough to ask for continuation now. Subscribe and tap the bell so the last walk lands while your hands remember the meter. In the comments, give me the 7 words you would write in a choir margin where breath becomes law. Then say continue if you want the final part, how spring takes down the last cruel notices, how bells retire to pegs, how sticks change jobs, and how 7 words move from porch to charter to habit, until even rumor sang them without blushing. I'll bring horn, chalk, ribbon, tin, vinegar, beetle, ladle, and the 1 card worth smudging every day. Spring pushes its soft hand through the cracks under every door, and the first thing it lifts is your bell. Light now, almost polite, so you hang it on the peg without feeling like you've surrendered. The card survives winter, with only 2 new thumbprints. The peg feels like a promise, not an arrest. The beam above the porch is still there, still at mouth height, still the right distance between people and their best selves. Alms placed, hand washed, lamp capped, bell hung, board between hands, names learned, no blows. You read it once because that's how you tell spring which habits it may not take. The ladle glints in its place, the tin cap clicks once for satisfaction, the staff sleeve dries like an old joke, ribbon waits for wrists instead of wounds. The square smells like wet stone and soup, not like fear. You take the basket, horn, chalk, ribbon, tin, vinegar, beetle, ladle, a fresh stack of cards, and you go outside to see which notices winter left nailed too high. Subscribe and tap our bell. Ours brings new rooms, not punishments. And in the comments, write the exact 7 words you'd use to replace a cruel gate notice today. Alms placed, hand washed, lamp capped, no blows. I'll pin the lines that travel and nail them for strangers who ask you for the kit after this. The first plank you pry down is the oldest lie. Announce yourself in letters tall enough to bruise throats. You sand the space it scarred and hang the new card lower, where wrists must brush it to leave. 1 ring at threshold, hand washed, staff dipped, bell hung, names learned, no blows. The sergeant who once loved watching bells behave like verdicts holds the ladder for you with a grin that belongs to someone newly bored by sticks. He runs his finger over names learned, blushes, and says the woman from the tannery vat came yesterday and left her name where unknown used to rest. He liked writing restored better than he expected to. The gate feels less like a courtroom, more like a kitchen door. At the market, boards that had practiced being barricades all winter return to their intended vocation, tables, and the card migrates onto them like lichen that loves beams. The baker hangs bread at board and sprinkles flour across the letters so they smell like policy. The wool stapler posts cloth measured on table, then teaches a child to draw a fish under the line when measurement behaves. The coal seller nails hand washed above her basin and keeps a rag by the tin cap so children can be deputized to scold lamps before they scold each other. Men who once equated volume with virtue practice the short chorus under breath. Board between hands. No blows. The fiddler turns it into a round and refuses payment because dignity is lighter when it hums. The choir copies the beam onto parchment, but that's not why the choir matters now. What matters is the tune it settled on. 7 words sung like inventory. They carry to alleys where posted cards will take another week to find beams. Boys who were bred for ladders clap alms placed on the downbeat and laugh when their palms smart. Girls who want to be sacristans in a century that still hoards titles cap lamps to the pitch of lamp-capped and feel older than spring. A cantor who loved the long alleluias discovers beauty is a short rule sung correctly by people who ate. The bell under the tower clicks once at vespers and then lets the rest of the evening belong to bowls. You take horn to the records office and the clerk has rearranged his desk, the register open, the stew ledger beside it, the common memory slate above, the basin and tin at easy reach. He reads names with the breath of a man who knows where his lamp cap lives. Mari, Rafe, Old Martin, Yzult, and the porch committee echoes each with a brief witness in chalk. The clerk has tattooed no sermons longer than soup into the margins of his habits. He talks less. His pen writes more verbs. He gives you a copy of the charter page, with the card written exactly where law can repaint itself without asking rulers to become poets. You smile because paper learned to be furniture. The bridge rehearses its kindness for travelers who didn't survive theirs. The old woman raises her staff sleeve twice, not to shout, but to test the spring that holds the tin. She collects toll in stories and returns change in ribbon. 1 knot for thanks, 2 for teach this as rule, 3 for nail our line lower when you reach your square. A wagoner who once tried to buy right-of-way with a whip now ties ribbon around his own wrist to ease his embarrassment. He hums the market round, off-key, which is the correct key for courage learning to keep time with gentleness. He turns and shouts no blows to his brother 3 carts back, and the line acquires a shape that resembles consent. The hospice out by the road hangs the card where dust admits defeat. Alms placed, hand-washed, lamp-capped, bell-hung, staff-dipped, bowl first, no blows. The sister who stirs the pot writes names learned on the chalk line under it and leaves space for 3 new pebbles. You stand a little while to decide whether spring changes the smell of soup. It does. It smells like rooms that will not be needed for rope. A pilgrim with a bell that had grown into his hand reads the card slowly, hangs the clapper like a good coat, and weeps because the breath in his chest finally belongs to him and not to a rule. You hand him ribbon, because ribbon asks less than bells demand. He ties it for the next pilgrim, because that is how grace enjoys itself. Spring invents backsliding as a sport. It sounds like just once, like only this, like we survived without that. A baker's brother, just once, measures midair because he wants to look generous. The fish chalk appears under horn without theatrics, witness, and his wrist learns the bruise that replaces shame. A boy tries to reorganize lamp caps into toys. The sacristan hands him a bowl and the tune instead. A clerk forgets to wash. The basin card returns his memory with a minimum of insult. Posted at mouth height becomes the most valuable line in the charter because it keeps rules where bodies can keep them. You pull 2 cruel slips down from places they'd been hiding. One said unclean above a door where washing was already happening. One said no entry over a gate that had a basin 3 steps inside. You replace both with the same 7 words and shake your head at the economy of late intelligence. You find, nailed inside a storeroom, a notice that commanded bells to be worn at night. You replace it with a peg. A watchman in the alley watches you doing this and falls in love with how tiny the revolution is. He steals a card and the habit of carrying the ladder where parades refuse to go, mid-market, Because this porch is audience as well as crew. Give me the 7 words you would carve into the inside of your doorframe where your own wrist will brush them before you discover again that you are human. Alms placed, hand washed, lamp capped, no blows. Post them in the comments. Steal someone else's and nail it where your morning forgets itself. Spring does its own inspection. Children checking pegs for bells that hung themselves. Women tapping staff sleeves with 2 fingers for tone. The barber dipping staff heads in perfumed vinegar because memory should be pleasant where it can be. Clerks asking strangers for names as if naming were a vaccination against cruelty. Watchmen rehearsing the drill without being begged. Widows choosing corners where their old throws won't tempt them. The mayor learns to carry the beam. He thought chairman meant chair. He discovers it means person who holds furniture steady while other people live. He looks better bored than anxious. You forgive him for his balcony. The city's messiest ritual, Spring Fair, arrives, and everyone flinches at old muscle memory. The stalls shout promises the rules never made them keep. Itinerant preachers line up their adjectives like cudgels. Bells from 5 parishes find excuses to practice themselves. The porch committee takes the day off from flinching and installs a second card 3 spans lower than necessary on the inside of the fair gate. Read this before raising your voice. Under it, the same 7 words. People do. It doesn't stop every parade, but it shortens most of them into acts wrists can obey. A troupe that had come to sell satire decides to sell sleeves and caps instead. They make more money, they leave less damage. You take the basket to a neighboring town that sent a letter full of envy and apologies. Their beam is too high, their basin too dry, their bell too proud. You hang your card and tap the wood until it hums at lip level. You teach the drill. You give the clerk a copy of the register margin where unknown turned into restored. You make the watch captain clumsy with a ladle until she laughs at herself. You let their old woman tell you a story about a bridge that was also a classroom. You leave their children arguing about whether no blows belongs between hand-washed and lamp-capped or after bell hung. You refuse to have an opinion. You trust wrists in weather. The gallows beam becomes furniture in public. Carpenters put it to work where you can't unsee it. Benches under the porch, a step at the basin, a horizontal where children can practice board between hands without bumping noses, a shelf in the records office where tokens rest between being fish and being thanks. A lintel at the fair gate that bruises throats into remembering humility. You hear lumber talk to itself and recognize words it learned in winter. Cap, ring, board, hand, name, no. You will never enjoy those words as poetry. You will defend them as architecture until your wrists retire. The last nasty rumor tries to hire a stick for spring. They've let bells stop. It will be sin next, says a man who worshipped distance because distance kept him fed. The beetle's daughter taps the beam with the beetle and says 1 ring at threshold. The market hums the line into his buttress. He throws up his hands and breaks exactly nothing. A child hangs a bell on a peg by his door for him because 1 act can be cruelly misread. A peg cannot. All that's left is handing the basket to whoever wrote me first to say they tried these 7 words in a place I'll never visit. You pack it simpler than law ever lets you. Horn pane wrapped in wool, rolled cards drilled for 2 tacks, a handful of nails, chalk, ribbon, tin sleeves, a vinegar jar that likes being refilled, a beetle that knows 1 meter, a ladle that needs no translation. You show the kit 1 more time on camera because channels like this live on practice, not wonder. You remind the new steward in some other square that beams are better than speeches, that pegs are better than punishments, that lids are better than drums, and that rhythm forms habits without needing applause. You hang the last card at your own door where morning won't let you get away with thinking you're finished. Alms placed, hand washed, lamp capped, bell hung, board between hands, names learned, no blows. You run your wrist across the words. Spring bruises you gently. You deserve it. So does everyone in any century who means well and needs furniture to be kind for them when meaning runs low. Now keep this kit moving. Subscribe and tap the bell so the next 7-part walk lands before your beam forgets its height. In the comments, leave two things: your 7-word lintel law you'll actually enforce at home, and the next theme title you want hammered into drills under horn. How parish bells outran gossip, why city walls ate generals, what market stalls taught ministers, or the title only your street knows it needs. We'll shoulder horn, chalk, ribbon, tin, vinegar, beetle, ladle, cards, and go again, because civic mercy lasts exactly as long as someone keeps posting short rules where wrists can touch them.